Joining us now on the Sunrise Morning Show is Robert Nicholson. He is president of the Philos Project, and he's on the board of advisors for In Defense of Christians. Robert, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Blessings to you.
You as well. Thank you. And you are the featured speaker for In Defense of Christians online speaker series. This taking place at noon tomorrow for the latest one. What do you plan to speak about?
Well, that's a great question. It was a question I was asking myself in trying to put some notes together. I think for me, what's most important is the collaboration between our two organizations. So In Defense of Christians, as you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, is I sometimes describe it as a kind of embassy for Christians, persecuted Christians in the Near East, in Africa, in Washington, D.C., right? These Christians don't have a country necessarily that speaks on their behalf, and in lieu of that, In Defense of Christians constitutes that embassy, and the work that they do on the Hill, lobbying the executive branch, trying to get practical solutions that help those communities is really without parallel. And I want to emphasize that point because I don't think people fully understand how unique that is, and then explain how the organization that I run, the Philos Project, contributes to In Defense of Christians' mission, and really by building a bridge between that embassy and Christians of all denominational and ethnic backgrounds around the United States.
Well, unpack that a little bit. So what do you see as the role of your organization in bringing that about?
Well, it's similar in carrying the embassy metaphor forward to the role of public diplomacy. So every embassy does the lobbying of the government, the capital of which they're located in, but they also have somebody on staff and sometimes a whole team whose job is public diplomacy, which means that they reach out to the country, and that's a big part of what we do at Philos. You know, we started, interestingly, in the same year that IDC started, independently. I didn't know them. They didn't know me at that time. But we both had a similar vision. We just were going about it in different ways. And for our part of Philos, what we wanted to do was to engage Christians, especially young Christians trying to figure out where they're going to spend their time, what kinds of careers they want to have, on these questions related to believers, suffering believers, in the Near East and elsewhere. And so at Philos, we put them through a series of programs, training programs. We take them on trips to the region, often to the Holy Land, to teach them on the ground the skills they need, the knowledge they need to be able to engage these issues intelligently. And thankfully, we've been able to funnel some of those people, especially some of those young people, into IDC itself, so that these people actually work at IDC and join IDC in the mission of, canvassing Washington, D.C. and making sure that these issues get the attention they deserve.
What would be the benefit to Middle Eastern nations if Christians were allowed to have a more legitimate seat at the table?
Oh, it's really the canary in the coal mine. It's a cliche, but in this case, it's absolutely true in that, the way these Christian communities are treated is the way that the entire society is going to function, right? So if there is a modicum of freedom and pluralism and Christians are brought into the social and political processes, that can't help but bear benefits for non-Christians, for Muslims of different backgrounds, and, of course, for non-Muslims as well. And I think one of the, if you really zoom out and you try to understand what is responsible for the problems that these Christians have, largely, not exclusively, but largely it's because that they are often caught up in the midst of what I sometimes call Muslim civil wars. Right, it's not always that Muslims are waking up in the morning and saying, I think I want to target a Christian. Yeah. But what often happens is that these societies are fighting. The majorities of these societies are fighting to determine what their future is going to be, which kind of Islam is going to be practiced. Will it be moderate? Will it be more fundamentalist? And so in the midst of that clash, these Christians get caught up and they become the scapegoat, right? They become the fifth column, the foreign element that's trying to undermine the country. And, of course, it's not true at all, but they have no means for pushing back. And so I think that if affirmative efforts are made to bring Christians in, to integrate them, not as some weird, alien group, but as a legitimate part of these countries, all of these other things will fall into place, right? The whole situation will calm down. That's my thesis anyway.
And just quickly, I mean, this is a big question to ask you to answer quickly, but, are there some practical ways that can come about?
Well, I mean, this is where the work of IDC becomes so important, because for average people, right, you and me, it's very difficult to get whole countries to do anything.
Right.
And so you need the power of the United States and its allies to put pressure on them, right? So what IDC is doing in Washington, D.C. is indispensable in that regard, because at a certain level, you and me and all of our friends just can't do that sort of work. But in the meantime, there's all kinds of other work that needs to be done, and it's much more human-sized, right? It's much more focused on the individuals, the communities that are in special need, right? So right now, I think of all the groups in the region, ironically, although it's been such a bastion and refuge for Christians for so many years, Lebanon and Lebanon's Christians are probably in the greatest need these days. I mean, the country is in really bad shape. And I think there's lots of work that could be done at the level of charity, philanthropy, that needs to be done. And there are a number of organizations that do that sort of work. We're running a campaign at the Philos Project right now for a different group, the Coptic Christians of Egypt, trying to raise money before Christmas. We're focusing on one particular village to make sure that they have enough food to eat this Christmas, and everybody gets a new outfit, which is a big deal in this village for Christmas. And it's those kinds of things that I think we as Christians need to band together to do, while IDC and others do that more high-level work of diplomacy.
Charity is an effective means of evangelization. That's not why we do it, but it certainly is a component in it. We've been talking to Robert Nicholson, and we've got In Defense of Christians linked at sunrisemorningshow.com, so you can go watch his webinar, again, at noon tomorrow. Robert, thank you.
Thank you so much.